All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at Ketos for our webinar where we are going to talk about managing SSL certificates automatically and preventing outages that so many organizations face. My name is Danielle Patterson. I am business development here at Ketos, and we have Igal Flegman, our co-founder and CEO. Igal, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, so I'm Yigal Fleckman. Danielle mentioned, I'm the co-founder and CEO, and I co-founded this company with my brother to solve this exact problem, that PKI is hard, and we need an easy way to do it. So today we're gonna talk about, as Danielle said, about how we can do that. So Danielle, take us through the numbers of what's going on in the world.
Sure. I always like to start with numbers. It's that science background, right? So
Yeah.
these are pretty scary PKI stats. But even when we look at the fact that 80% of organizations have experienced an SSL related outage in the last 2 years, and the fact that the number of certificates that organizations are managing are they increase dramatically. So over the past year we're seeing a 43% increase in the number of certs that organizations have to stay on top of. And in addition to that, we see, as far as PKI related outages, just because you had one does not mean that you won't have several, right? So 25% of organizations surveyed have had 5 to 6 PKI related outages in the past 6 months. So we know that organizations on average are managing, 130,000 certificates. And, traditionally, we know what certificate management looks like. It involves, multiple spreadsheets that Bob, Sally, and Jim are trying to stay on top of, right? So I want you to take us through kind of like it's a perfect thread to go through, Igal. It kind of sums up how people are handling SSL certificates.
Yeah, and just one quick thing before we go through that. It's important to show how, like 130,000 certificates. And if you get 129,999 right and you rotate them on time, you still get an outage for that one. There's no gold star for getting almost all of them right. And that's where automation comes in, because as you said, 130, that's a big spreadsheet that I don't want to keep track of. And I know it's divided among other people, but it is still engineering hours you're wasting just looking at spreadsheets instead of making the computers do what they do best, which is automated tasks. But yeah,
Yeah.
so in here it shows how this thread is one of my favorite ones. This is actually kind of like an old thread that I found through my phone when I was still working at Microsoft. And it asks, and this shows kind of the sentiment of the people. Like, this is in Reddit, in the DevOps thread. And it just talks about how you actually manage SSL certificates. Now someone was actually asking like a serious question, and everybody was like, well, after a production outage, and then it was after Microsoft had a Teams related outage with a certificate, so they were like, if it works for Microsoft, it works for me. And you can see every single person just kind of mentioning how like the outage works. And then I really like this one from Janora that says, and after the outage, someone creates a calendar event and it works for a few years until they leave, because that's actually how most organizations do it, which, as it shows there, it works for 5 years and that person leaves and then you have that problem again. So obviously computers stay there forever. So let's just switch it to computers. And now, Danielle, I don't know if you want to talk us to this graph, because it's a graph that you see a lot.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm a dashboard girl myself. I love data and very easy to understand terms, like green means good, red means bad, right? So this is an example of our user interface and our dashboard capability of Easy Monitor. And we have been doing a ton of these SSL health analysis with organizations, just really kind of functioning as a consultant and giving them insight into what they have no idea, what they're trying to manage between multiple spreadsheets, or God forbid, they're not really managing it all, right? Eagle, can you drill down a little bit into the data that we're looking at?
Yeah, so I mean, this one is just kind of like the overview. It tells you like how many certificates are expiring, kind of like the health. We grade you on a scale from like A, B, C, and D, and F, just kind of like in school. And as you can see, this is actually from a customer. We obviously took out all information that would link them to them. But you can see this is a pretty normal thing. Like they might have one or two endpoints in the A's, then a bunch in B's, C's, and then some in F's. And there's actually a great story that I want to talk about that is about this company that I scanned them, and they were like a mid-sized company, nothing huge, and we get mostly A's. And I'm like, there's no way. We have worked with very large companies and they never have such a good result. So I scan it again and they still get A's. And I was like, all right, like I have to jump into this call, talk to them, and see what they are doing that all these other companies are not doing. And we jump into this call, and I was like, guys, I'm amazed about what you guys are doing. Like, who's your PKI team? Who's managing all this security stuff? And one looks to the other and says, oh, I guess that uh, free SSL certificate thing that we're using, it's actually really good. So it showed that like they had no clue what they were doing. They just automated it, and it shows that it's way better than having a bunch of PKI experts trying to manually manage everything.
Oh, and
And
free is cheaper too, right?
yeah, free is always cheaper than cost. Um, and so you're probably wondering, what is that free thing? And the answer is Let's Encrypt. And in here you can see the Let's Encrypt statistics of how it has taken over. And the reason for it, it's easy to use. They use the ACME protocol, which is a protocol that basically um, validates that you are the owner of the website by asking you to put some special kind of code in the website. Then they go check and they're like, all right, they can put the code in the website, so they own it. And the great thing about this is that it is easy to automate because you can have an agent in the computer that requests a certificate, grabs that code, puts it, ACME checks it, gets a certificate, and installs it. And it is magical. It works. It's free, and everybody should be using it. We use it here internally because we, as much as we like PKI, we don't like rotating certificates manually. So we use this tool.
And
And
Eagle, I just want to stop you because we got a good infographic here. And you really touched on the point that obviously this free tool does an awesome job at what it does. It's free. Why not use it, right?
yeah,
But we have EasyCA in here pretty strategically because even a phenomenal free tool is not covering every base, right?
yeah. So as I mentioned, this is DNS based. So, it works great for ketos.io, but it doesn't work great for our internal HR site where you declare expenses that is not accessible from the web because Let's Encrypt doesn't have access to your private network. And that's where we released a few weeks ago or months ago um, EasyCA Acme server. So it allows you to kind of use the same tools as you use for your publicly trusted certificates. So like Kubernetes has one, Nginx has one. Like you can see here, we have some of them on the right, showing kind of like basically anything that can host your website can probably run Acme and take the thing automated for you. And it's great, and you should do it right now for all your public certificates. But then when it comes to your private certificates, you want to use the same tools. You don't want to be kind of like a second-class citizen. Your servers that are being used by your organization. So that's where EasyCA comes in. It allows your engineers to stop wasting time managing internal certificates and use the exact same tools they use for their external tools as for their internal servers.
I like that. And I think anyone in technology, specifically, managing technology portfolio for an organization, small or big, that strategic approach to obviously minimize the number of tools in their toolbox to get the functionality that they need, it just makes sense all around, right?
Yeah, and it minimizes the time that it takes the engineer to learn how to use the tools. It minimizes the time that the engineer wastes because it's set and forget, which is our favorite way. You set it, you tell the computer what to do, and it will do it every month. And it also creates quick certificate rotation, so it's no longer every 2 years or anything because you have to be manual. You can do it every 30 days and just kind of like quickly rotate those certificates, have that cryptographic agility that is needed in today's zero trust world.
Okay, cryptographic agility, that's a pretty sweet buzzword, but it seems a little counterintuitive. I like how you think though. Keep things simple, leverage the technology that works, and again, put your human resources at work doing those high value tasks that computers are not optimized to do, right?
Yeah. But right now we only talked about SSL. And yes, it is a big part of certificates, but there are other certificates that have to be managed. And once again, talking about zero trust, we don't want passwords out there. And if you don't want passwords, what you need are certificates. And this is where a tool like EasyCA, once again, will help you because you have for example, in this diagram, we decided to use Azure Key Vault, which is one of our many integrations that it will actually connect to EasyCA. And once again, it's kind of like the same service as with ACME. Obviously, it uses different technologies. It uses whatever Key Vault needs us to use, but it is kind of the same. You set up your certificate, you set it up once, and EasyCA will automatically rotate it for you. And the great thing about being able to integrate it with something like Key Vault is it works for all your service authentication. So if you're using a web app that needs a certificate, it works. If you're using Azure Function, Azure Automation, Azure VMs, anything it can get pushed to. So we kind of integrated with one thing that integrates with hundreds of things. And that's kind of how we scale and help you be able to integrate with everything and kind of forget about certificate rotation, which is the key. At the end of the day, you want to be able to set it up, have a great setup, and be able to run. And that's one of the things that it was ingrained into me by Paul Adair, my teacher of all this PKI stuff, is you want to spend like 90% of the time is planning, and then 10%, if you planned everything right, is just 10% implementing, and then it's set for life. So spending that time planning and making sure that everything will auto rotate, it's definitely worth it nowadays that you're managing hundreds of thousands of certificates that keep growing. 43% growth every year. That's a crazy amount of certificates.
That's a crazy big spreadsheet, those two, right?
Yeah.
For folks that are in technology, it still surprises me to see how much lack of leveraging, the best technology out there for tasks is, it's very prevalent. I don't care if it's a large organization like we saw with the Microsoft Teams outage or a smaller shop. There is a better way. And I know that you love to talk the long-term strategy and approach. That this is really what gets you excited. This is why Ketos exists.
Yeah. And so now we talked about crypto agility, and we talked about rotating certificates, and we talked about service-to-service authentication. And this is one of the key things that we have to change. A lot of the people are using certificate thumbprint pinning, which means you grab kind of like the thumbprint or the serial number of the certificate, and you kind of use it as a password. And you say, if this certificate authenticates to me, it's okay. The problem with that is if we're starting to rotate every 30 days, you start having problems because you have to change your code every 30 days to kind of like update this password, which doesn't scale. So we have to change to certificate-based, to subject name-based authentication, which means you check the subject name, and let's say it's a username. It says user smart card. You check that it says egal@ketos.io, and you check that it comes from your smart card CA. And you check, very important, check your revocation list. We have caught so many companies now checking revocations lists, which basically checks whether or not that certificate is valid. And then you're good to go. And if I rotate the certificate, it doesn't really affect you because you're just checking my name and that it comes from the right CA. So there is no more of that thumbprint pinning, which will make your life easier once again.
Right on.
All right, so now let's open it up for questions.
Okay, well, I always have a few on my list here. I'm gonna hop in.
Sure.
Because nobody's raised their hand. But so certificate pinning, and I know, I guess in my mind, this non-technical, PKI expert mind, it seems like a password would be more secure than just obviously using that subject name and validating the CA. Can you kind of clarify a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I mean, a password would not be more secure just because a password is brute forceable. Like it's maybe what 10 characters, something like that, very easy to brute force. When you're talking about certificates, you're talking about billions of years of compute to try to guess that private key. But when you're using the subject name and CA, it kind of goes back to how you authenticate your ID. When you go to a bar and they ask for your ID, they don't check, okay, it's the ID number X577, and that's the one that grants them access to this. You check that it has your face, it has your name, and that it was issued by the state. So we're kind of transferring that same, I don't want to say technology, that same authentication method to certificates. You're checking that it says that the certificate is issued to the entity that it has to be issued, and that it's issued by someone you trust. For in that case was the DMV, in this case is the CA. So it
Got
kind of
it.
like moves that authentication from how humans do it to how computers do it.
Got it. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep. Any other
Um,
questions?
no, I think I'm good. And I
All right.
don't see anybody else chatting anything up. I do just, like, I want to reiterate, this is our bread and butter. These types of topics and speaking about planning, strategy, and best ways to execute on your PKI as a whole. This is what we love to talk about. I mean, full disclosure, it's what EGAL loves to talk about, and it's really where we shine. So if there's any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. If I don't have the answer, I'm going to get you to somebody that does. And ultimately, it's about, hopefully getting you on the best technology, which is Ketos. But ultimately, we're just looking to share some tips and tricks that helps everybody become more secure.
Yeah, and on the topic of reaching out, I'm gonna take this opportunity and invite you guys. If you're gonna be in Vegas anytime in August, we're gonna be there because we are gonna be in Black Hat, so we're gonna have a booth there. Then in DEF CON, I'm actually presenting on cloud security problems, and then we're gonna go to the Gartner IAM Summit. So if you're gonna be in any of those three conferences, we'll be there, and we'll be happy to talk to you about cryptographic security and how to make your company more secure in this zero trust world.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, and thank you, Eagle.
Yeah,
Have a
thank
great
you.
rest of your day.